Hey everyone, and welcome back. Well, this was looking like a really sleepy week with not much going on, but then Blizzard announced what they were going to do with WoW Classic, and then they talked about Azerite, so, you know, both two chilled out topics. Plus, we also have some other fun things. As an example, Xal'atath's pretty much back. Now, if you've been around from when I first talked about Xal'atath, like every 2 weeks, yeah, then you know I'm pretty damn excited for the lore. Oh, and also today and tomorrow are the final days of this month's Patreon art. That, of course, was bumped up to being 2 items per month going forward, so you can check that out. The next one's not quite ready, but I think you're going to love it. Okay, right, let's roll. First up, we have Classic, and in a really unexpected move, Blizzard have announced that WoW Classic will be playable at BlizzCon. And in your house if you buy the virtual ticket. Yup, the WoW Classic servers will be open from the start of BlizzCon until the 8th of November, giving you a chance to play a few of the early zones, and that's for the price of $50. So yeah, pretty much the price of an actual game. Now, when you think about the numbers, it's insane. Now, Blizzard, in doing this one promotion, will sell hundreds of thousands of copies of a demo for $50, netting more money than most games will ever make, and, well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. Now, I know BlizzCon ain't cheap, but I'd wager that this one promotion will put WoW Classic as a project into heavy profit almost immediately, which, hey, not a bad thing. And I'm the last person to be found at a picket screaming about profit. So, fair enough. I think it's just an interesting commentary on the power of scale, narrative, and I suppose hype. Now, the virtual ticket itself, to me, not a great value. This is just the demo, and for the coverage, look, all the WoW stuff's going to be in my channel for free. I think you should put that $50 into a game or some indie games. I think you'll get a lot more of it with that. But anyway, as for Classic itself, yeah, I'm really excited. So I'll have the virtual ticket for the sake of the content creation anyway. So once I'm done with the initial BlizzCon coverage, then my goal will be to make some Classic content while I've got access to the demo. Now, I was really excited with the announcement of Classic when it was announced. So yeah, I can't wait to jump in. Classic was such a different experience. Now, around that time, I was playing a game that was more Classic than Classic, RUNESCAPE. Now, that might seem utterly insane, but RUNESCAPE was, well, it's a lot more of a sandbox when compared to Classic WoW, so it had this really strong sense of exploration and a player-driven experience, big open world full of things to do, some really brutal PvP, you lost all your stuff. Lazy Peon actually did a video recently on that about old school RUNESCAPE. I really think you should listen to that video. He's got great things to say, and you should especially check that out if you've not played RUNESCAPE before, and maybe if you've been put off by the look and the feel. I mean, it's an odd sort of thing to say, the look and feel, because if you look at, say, Ultima or EverQuest, both very hardcore MMOs, looking a little bit more RuneScape-y, I suppose. But anyway, I bring that up because even though I didn't play Classic exhaustively, I kind of dabbled from time to time. By being a RuneScape player, I do know what that old school style of MMO feels like, and with Classic, I'm essentially just excited to get a version of WoW that has more of that old school flavor, a less directed experience where things are a slower pace, where there's goals that you're working towards that feel very meaningful, kind of like, a goal that you'd hit in Classic with like the high point of your week or month, rather than the high-speed, fast iteration, but with small rewards that kind of is what the modern game is like to play. Now, that's all kind of fine and rosy to say, but Classic is going to face problems. Players these days are better, they're going to finish content quicker, and that's going to mean that, in whatever way the Blizzard releases Classic content, players are just going to carve their way through it super quickly because we're just so much better at the game and fully utilizing our toolkits. So that's going to mean that really the numerical possibility, depending on the amount of gear people can get per week, that'll be the main factor determining how fast people can get through Classic, because the difficulty, the coordination challenge of bosses, that's not going to be an issue to players. Now, that's kind of interesting because it means we'll burn through the content of WoW Classic pretty quickly, which then makes you wonder, are they going to add more content to WoW Classic? I mean, look at old school RuneScape. Jagex add new content to old school RuneScape. Indeed, old school RuneScape's got like twice, I think double the player count to the modern version of RuneScape, which is pretty damn interesting. So when we think about Classic WoW, is that going to be another development fork of World of Warcraft, just with a different philosophy and a different design? That would be super interesting. What if you take Classic WoW and you slowly after all of the existing roster of content is done, what if you then start to add more content? Maybe they would just hop into TBC and keep on going from there, or maybe they would just take WoW off on a different fork. And you know what? If it's successful enough, something like that could work. Now, I'm not saying that, it's going to be well, say an example like where old school RuneScape is bigger than main RuneScape. I doubt Classic WoW is going to be bigger than WoW because Classic WoW is not a sandbox in the way that old school RuneScape was, which means that it is a lot more infinitely replayable, I would say. But it certainly is going to be interesting seeing how Blizzard deal with this. I'd almost say that it's almost completely certain it will be a success. It's really just a matter of if they are able to capture that lightning in a bottle, what do they do with it? And really, if I was to capture, I think the one thing that has people excited about World of Warcraft, I'm going to use an analogy, well, I'm going to use an example from a book, which is Principles by Ray Dalio, and a lot of his point is that the things that matter are meaningful work and meaningful relationships. And when you look into Classic WoW, really those two things are kind of pillars. Meaningful relationships in the sense of community that forms, and meaningful work in the sense of the rewards being meaningful but slow-paced. And I think those things come together in a way that is quite different to the modern game, and I think that is what players are really excited about. And yeah, hey, if that ends up being a different dev fork of WoW, well, damn, sign me up. It would certainly be an interesting landscape to find ourselves in. Next up, I just want to mention Xal'atath and the lore because something really exciting has been data mined. There's a new version of Xal'atath for patch 8.1. Now, I'm not going to spoilers here, but suffice to say, it seems like this is going to just go in really, really interesting places. Now, then, when you look at what I talked about last week with Death and some of the more recently data mined Death stuff, and then, of course, just the main plot line, well, you know, the story of Warcraft is getting more and more interesting than ever. I just kind of wanted to make this point. So, you know, it's really interesting because, like, it's no secret that I am falling out of love with some of their endgame systems. But the opposite is happening with elements of the world and the story, and it's kind of crazy. Like, recently, I spent 5 hours going through the works of H.P. Lovecraft, comparing them with various quotes, drawing parallels, and that was just for the fun of it. So, I suppose I'm bringing all of this up because I'm finding it interesting how, you know, WoW is developing and how my interests are changing. And like going back to Xal'atath, she's just another really cool thing to throw into the puzzle box of what they're doing. She's a wild card. She could change so much of what we know about N'Zoth and the Void, especially because of the power of Sargeras' corruption. And that's just really cool and exciting when you go through 8.1, even though I see all these systems and my initial thought is, yeah, that's all cool, I'll do them a few times, but I don't really care because it's not foundational. There's all this lore that I'm then kind of excited about. So it's kind of odd, I suppose. In many ways, WoW for me is like this thing that I'm continuing to be super interested in the world, and then as for the content, well, you know, maybe I'm doing 2v2s, like, you know, learning how to fist weave, which is what I'm doing now. But other than that, maybe it is just a thing where I kind of hop in intensely for like, you know, a month or two at a time, and just in the in-between periods, kind of just go into low power mode and, you know, chill out and do what I want, but don't really get too, you know, too fussed about it. So I guess it's just interesting how WoW is developing and how like the broader interest in World of Warcraft is kind of the thing that's really carrying a lot of it for me now. Okay, next up, it is time for the big topic. You know, we just finished topics that are really exciting and pretty positive. Now we're diving headfirst into the murky waters because it is time to talk about Azerite gear. Now, I've just reread what I actually wrote for this this topic, and like I've got to say straight up, I'm going to be really critical of how Blizzard are representing themselves here. Just know that I think they are unaware of how they sound. I love their game, and it is my genuine intention to help them learn and gain perspective on how they are being perceived. I've been in this game long enough to know that being a constant source of outrage, while it does lead to a short-term spike in views, long-term, terrible game plan, terrible idea. It's not a foundation to build anything on. So know that I don't take this lightly, and you know, if you're watching my channel to support your hobby, then I understand that this could be a downer. So look, I don't anticipate talking about this stuff too much more, and as I look ahead on the channel, there's a lot of game guides, lore discussion, and things like that. But okay, look, let's just go. Blizzard posted a response that I really think has done them so much more harm than good, and from reading the fallout, people seem to agree with that. They did not engage with the substance of people's beliefs. They came off as looking down their noses at players. They showed a level of disconnect that was worrying. There's often talk of them being in a bit of a bubble over there and not getting things. And I think that means that sometimes they just get surprised by things all the time, when to us in the community, it just seems completely obvious. And I suppose if I was to say one thing with Blizzard, it would be this, you know, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Blizzard try to make these really rigid systems that tightly direct and manage the player experience. You can't sit down, work out a grand perfect system that manages individuals and what they will do, implement it, and then expect it to work. It never works. And frankly, what it does end up doing, when it works, you just have mobile games which are unethical manipulation of human psychology. It's not good. And when I say, your plan doesn't survive contact with the enemy, sometimes it begins to feel like players are the enemy. And it just doesn't feel good. But with that, I think we need to get into the post. So Blizzard were responding to a large thread that did a fantastic job of summarizing common complaints with Azerite. Now, it did have a bit of a hyperbolic title. Let's be real, I can't say anything about that. But okay, first, I think that Lore really poisoned the well with a comment that felt very nasty and dismissive, so I'm really going to take him to task on it. He said, seriously, I can't be the only one who remembers farming level 30 dungeons for AQ40 resistance gear. Look, that's just not at all honest. As Preach covered in his recent video, that was a niche case that impacted a tiny number of people and also was a small aspect of a single raid's progression. Yeah, it was silly. But to say that that's even in the same ballpark as an expansion-wide system that impacts the entire player base is absurd. Opening in this manner makes you look defensive, it makes you look petty, it makes you look emotionally reactive. It is so clearly silly that the fact you're attempting to bring it up in this manner makes it look like you are looking down on us. Now look, I really don't think that's the case, but I'm saying this because that's how people reacted, and I think that that reaction was genuinely surprising to Blizzard. Look, while movies may tell you that pithy quips are a good idea, they're not helpful when adults have to come together to talk about substantive issues. They dilute the conversation, they sidetrack us, and in cases like this, they hurt your own mission. Okay, so after that bizarre comment, they went on to say that trait targeting isn't really the problem, and that the main problem is that traits are not really balanced, and that is the reason why people, they don't like not being able to target things. No, I'm afraid not. People actually do like being able to target things regardless of numbers. It's almost as if setting a goal for yourself and then working towards that goal is an important part of playing the game, and wanting to go and earn, say, a specific fabled bit of loot. That is at the heart of the fantasy that this game used to be trying to realize. Next, we saw Blizzard say that the OP's claim that traits are useless and uninteresting is at odds with them saying that every gear change requires simming, saying that if the latter was the goal, then it would be best to make the traits all be very simple. Well, this is a very simplistic read of the situation, as it's conflating separate criticisms in a nonsensical way in order to discredit both of them. Being frustrated over having to sim all the time is because it's often not clear if a trait is better, because the traits themselves are very uninspired and boring. They're just random free damage. Well, if a trait was, good and clearly good, say in AoE, like as an example, Fists of Fury lasts a second longer, then you wouldn't have to sim in order to know you go for that in an AoE fight. Now, that is an example of a trait that is more interesting and doesn't require simming. So Blizzard, it's not hard, and what you did is just a prime example of not engaging with the substance of people's criticisms. Things like this are exactly the communication sort of blunders that you get memed on. Now that said, well, look, if you're in the position of personally knowing that this system is just a wash, but you've got to stick with it for an expansion, can you really say something real as a company rep just a month into the X-Pack? Probably not, and this leads us to the next point where Blizzard agreed that having to refarm traits doesn't feel good, but it's likely just a downside of the system that we'll have to accept for the expansion. So there you go, a fundamental flaw with Azerite that feels majorly bad, and yeah, probably a part of the X-Pack for its whole life. They next talked about how the balancing of that the last few weeks was going on, that it's been successful enough in making the Azerite stuff just a bit more consistent in terms of the trait power, which is probably a good thing, but their next point does tick me off a lot though. The reforging costs are so high because they don't want it to be sustainable for you to constantly modify your gear. Instead, they want you to earn multiple sets. So that's maybe on a low end, 3 sets per spec for 3 specs, so 9 bits of loot. That's a tremendous amount to keep up with in terms of getting good item levels for all of them, for every single set, and it's a massive annoyance in terms of bag space. Now, Lore said that they would likely get more restrictive on reforging in the future, not less. So they really are locked into this. The plan is for you to have bags full of Azerite gear and for Azerite progression just to be locked in. You know what? This just seems evil to me, really evil. It's just a thing to get you to farm more, to grind more, to just have more things to keep updated. It's entirely contrived and not customer friendly feeling. It just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It feels wicked, nasty, laced with venom, doubly so because of how tremendously expensive the reforging is. Sure, it's 5G the first time, but it doubles every time. 10 reforges later, 2.5k. 15 reforges, 81k. Now it halves every 3 days, but you know, good luck if you're trying to dabble into other specs. Artifacts, legendaries, and sets did not have this big, disgusting anti-player problem. Look, Blizzard, I get that you basically just want to make it so the players have another 9 to 15 bits of gear they need to keep updated, even though it's only 3 slots, because you want a longer-lasting loot system, but the way that you did it feels horrible. I mean, it feels like space aliens came in and thought it up, and you know, it's not like we got to test any of this much anyway. BFA didn't have access to max level pre-made characters, which is much of the, you know, reason why the 120 experience is so rough. And look, if you can't design this system right, and the only way for it to work is as badly thought out as this, don't punish players for your system. Design a better system. This feels at worst a bit evil, and at best just misguided, ill-conceived, and a bit incompetent. Now, Lore did later on go on to say that they are considering upping the drops for Mythic Plus, but that they're not exactly sure how yet, and that 8.1 will have new gear with new traits, which could solve some of our current problems. Though that said, you know, will that update like the Mythic Plus gear that comes from the dungeon pool, because that's already here now? It's hard to know. So overall, they admitted that the Azerite system has some really deep flaws. They showed their hand in regards to the intent of the reforging costs and you needing to maintain a silly amount of gear, of course, you know, with no decent way to get that gear. They dodged complaints the community has, and yeah, this backfired, didn't it? Look, more communication is good and it's needed, but by being more communicative, they are beginning to show how out of touch they are. Personally, I think the Battle for Azeroth needs a major patch that, in the style of Destiny 2 or No Man's Sky, aims to massively improve core systems. I think that the Nazjatar raid should entirely remove Azerite gear from the game. Instead, it should move that all the traits onto the neck piece. Traits could be unlocked by doing various bits of content just like the Azerite gear. You would then have a pool of, say, 15 traits, just, you know, you're able to pick between 3 of them, say, just like how talents work. Have, you know, one, like, tree for each of your specs. Really simple system, job done. Oh, guess what? That's basically like glyphs that they added in Wrath of the Lich King. Perhaps then, you know, put sets back and we could be in a really good place with loot. It would technically be less gated than the Azerite gear progression, but look, I don't think Azerite gear is keeping people logging into the game. I think someone at Blizzard needs to take ownership of this fiasco. They need to have the public bravery to admit that, like, they were wrong with this system and perhaps announce an overhaul similar to what I described. Like, Blizzard, if you can pull that off, you'll do a lot of good for the long-term health of BFA, and you'll also look really good in the process, like you've been listening. Look, just please, don't sunk cost fallacy yourselves into this one. Okay, well, that was fun. I mean, maybe I've had a few lem sips too many, but I kind of did just, you know, snort up and go at them with a scalpel. But look, I'm happy to take a hit, even if it means that, you know, just in the goal of getting these ideas out there and trying to explain the source of the frustrations that are hurting the game. I think the Blizzard, honestly, they need help understanding with how players are engaging their game and whether, you know, they want it or not. It's a decently large megaphone that I can point in their face and say, hey, guys, this is a lot of the problems people have with your game. I really don't think you understand them. Because, unfortunately, most of the time the Blizzard opens their mouth in regards to things like Azerite, they show they don't get it. They show they're not really getting the core of the problem. Like, they're kind of getting some of the surface level stuff, and that's shown in their talk about balancing. But when you go deeper to the things that really matter, the things that drive the game, the beating heart of World of Warcraft and how they've been changing that, I think they either don't get it or they're not willing to admit that they're wrong in some regards, where what I would say is, look at Destiny 2. People started to embrace them again once they decided to fix their game a bit. Look at No Man's Sky. Tremendously disastrous launch, but they worked in their game, they did a big free patch, and the internet loved them because they put the work in, but they were also realistic and, you know, acknowledging that things weren't good at the start. I think Blizzard really needs to do something like that. They can't just ignore the problem and let it fester. I was doing YouTube throughout Warlords of Draenor, and I didn't always conduct myself that well during that period of time, but the one thing about Warlords of Draenor that kind of hurt is that for a lot of it, they were kind of silent on things, they kind of pretended a lot of problems didn't exist, and that really hurt them with the community. I think they just need to take a different approach, and hopefully someone at Blizzard who's sort of seen what I'm getting at there and maybe feel some of my exasperation, because I just, whenever they talk, I just feel myself face palming because they just don't get it. It's kind of crazy. So yeah, there you go. That's what's up with the Azerite gear. Thankfully though, much like with how, well, you know, say with Legion, I just decided I didn't care about legendaries and they weren't much of an issue for me in the game. I just don't care about Azerite stuff. That's okay. I have the option to do that because I'm just doing casual 2v2s, which is a project that's been going great. And the next step of that for me is learning fist weaving. So I'm probably going to head over to Peaks of Serenity soon. See, we had been doing Holy and Windwalker, which was pretty good, and there were some really fun times, like this one time where a rogue ran away, and like I was stunned or whatever, but one of my Storm Earth and Fires followed the rogue and killed him, which was really funny. But I've been loving the PvP side of the game because it's so evergreen, right? It's like every time you go in, it feels different, and that's honestly, that and the lore of the game, they're the two things that have really been just keeping me sort of tied to World of Warcraft and engaged and passionate about playing it. But, you know, if I say watch Preach's videos and I get the perspective of a Mythic Raider, or, you know, some of the people in my game dev team and their friends who are sort of heroic to, you know, dabbling in Mythic Raiders, you know, from them, all the sounds that I hear are like, we love the bosses of World of Warcraft. We love the experience of going into a raid. But all these things surrounding it, we don't like, and it's not fun. You know, I was just at EGX, you know, for our game, and you know, because I tweeted out that I was there, I'd say like every 20 minutes, you know, someone would come up to me and talk about the channel and the game. And what was great about EGX is I was, you know, able to spend a few minutes with everyone, you know, assuming they didn't have to run off or whatever. And almost everyone was, actually literally everyone, over 4 days of being at EGX, who was talking about that, didn't, and that was most of them, they were not in a good place with the game, and I think they were mostly raiders, so that kind of makes sense. So it's kind of weird, I suppose, you know, if I think purely about my own experience, I'm having a really good time because I'm not really feeling the downsides of all these, but when I try to put myself in the shoes of all the people who I talk to, and, you know, listen to their opinions and what they're saying, and think back to when I was really into raiding, especially like my favorite raid tier ever is Throne of Thunder, like Lei Shen, just best fight ever. Maybe there's been a better one since, but that fight's got a special place for me. But when I talk to all these people, you know, I just get concerned, right? And I really, really want World of Warcraft to do well and be sustainable into the future, and it gets really sad. It gets really sad. This element of, you know, what I do for a living and love doing, just having this big downer being attached to it. And I mean, yeah, like I've got to be real with you about it, right? I can't, you know, there's no way to polish it to make it all better. Now that said, you know, as I alluded to earlier on, there's lots of lore coming up. I've got like 4 lore videos planned out, and that's something I'm really passionate about. And that's a fun, positive topic that's just a good, like a big positive for everyone. So I'm really happy about that. And when 8.1 comes out, there'll be guides to do. I'll be back to my bread and butter. That will all be good. Hopefully 8.1 is going to bring a new bunch of traits that are really good. And hopefully we'll start to see some, you know, things be tweaked or changed or whatever. But look, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at with Azerite, and I just felt like that post with Blizzard really did deserve, deserve the full run, a full try, because it was just kind of indicative of a lot of things that have been frustrating with them recently. And it's probably led to this being a stupidly long news video. So, look, thank you very much for watching. I totally get how probably the back 60% of this was not something you were into listening to and just came off as, you know, moaning, complaining bullshit or whatever. Because, I mean, yeah, I don't like exactly, you know, record one of these and end thinking, great, what a brilliant day. I really owned them. That's not fun, right? No one finds that fun. I don't know. Look, just let me know what you think down in the description or the comments side. I'd love to hear what you've got to say about Azerite, about the communication, about that post, and also if you want more discussion in that, Preach released a 30-minute video, and then previous to that, he's had 2 videos which cover all that pretty well. So yeah, you can do that. Anyway. Thank you very much for watching and bearing with me. A lot of cool stuff coming on the channel pretty soon, and I will see you next time.